Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York. Tina Turner does ask the question humans have been asking throughout the ages. What's love got to do with it? Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov answers the eternal question by saying the greatest suffering for humans is not being able to love. For him, it's the greatest hell one could ever experience. For Freud, we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love, never so forlornly unhappy as when we have lost our love. Without love, we fall ill. Cornel West, calling for a radical revolutionary love, says you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. Justice is what love looks like in public, just as tenderness is what love feels like in private. We are who we are because somebody loved us. In a 2016 primetime speech during the Democratic National Convention, Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Movement electrified the convention with a thundering speech calling on activists to be the moral defibrillator of our time and shock this nation with the power of love. For the psychiatrist James Gilligan, love becomes an all-encompassing human need. Just as the body needs oxygen to live, the soul needs love to survive. Without it, we experience the death of the self. What's love got to do with it? Everything. It's not just a secondhand emotion. Love is everything vital that keeps us alive to our existence as individuals and as a species. And our guest on the Radical Imagination today is Beatty Cohan-Vrettos. She's a critically acclaimed author, psychotherapist, sex therapist, activist, media personality, and commentator. Among her many media credits is a hilarious speech that went viral with Samantha Bee on The Daily Show spoofing federally funded penis pumps. She's the host of the Ask Beatty Show, which airs live on Progressive Radio Network every Monday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. And most importantly for me, she's the love of my life and my everything. So, welcome, Beatty, to the Radical Imagination. Thank you so much for being on.
It's great to be here.
It's great because people tell me, they come up to me on the street and say, when is Beatty coming on again?
Right, it's been a year. Why didn't you ask me before?
I've asked you. I know your schedule's a busy one,
yes.
But we've worked it out and you're here today. And
that's right.
And we're so excited to talk about love, relationships, what it means to people, how we can help people become better in their relationships and love more fully and so on. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Why don't you start by telling us a little about how you became so interested in this work and field?
Well, I think from the time I was a little girl, there was something that really attracted me to the idea of helping people. And when I was about, maybe 6 or 7, I don't know how I managed to find this show, but there was a call-in counseling show, and this was in Winnipeg, at midnight.
Canada.
Now, right, Canada.
Midnight, and a 6-year-old girl, you were
I don't
up
understand.
At midnight.
Right.
Okay.
My parents
Your
had
shortwave or whatever.
They had bought me a little white transistor radio. Now, how I ever would have discovered the show, I have no idea. And the pastor, I'll never forget his name, Pastor Eglin, and people were calling in, with problems, with relationship problems.
He was a pastor?
He was a pastor.
Of what church, or it didn't make much difference?
I don't remember, and I didn't meet him much later when I was a teenager, but there was something about this, Jim, that made me want to help people, and here I was, this little kid, wanting to host a call-in counseling radio talk show, and of course from there, I became the magnet, for some reason, that people would come to as a child with their problems. So I was one of these people, I never had a decision to make about what I was going to do. I was either going to go to law school and help people, or I was going to become a psychotherapist. And of course, I ended up, going to McGill, and I have my graduate and postgraduate specialization in marriage and family therapy and sexual dysfunction. And I've been practicing now, and every time I say it on the Ask Beatty show, it really kind of freaks me out, for over 35 years.
Right.
And the primary reason why people call me for therapy is because they're either looking for love, or they are in loveless relationships, or they were not fortunate enough when they were growing up as little children to have love in their families, and they need to work through all of that about what did and did not happen in their family of origin, so that they're then able to move forward and hopefully find love, which is so challenging these days.
It is. What we're going to do in the show is have a few clips from Jim and Carol Gilligan.
Love them.
On very, very short little clips on some aspects of their own marriage, what love is, and so on. But before we do that, what about your own primary family and the love that you saw there and within your tight-knit community?
Well, I'm an only
In
child.
Winnipeg, an only
Yes,
child, as am I.
an only child. And I had a tremendous love relationship with my father in particular, who was really very much the emotional person in the family. My mom, she made sure that little Beatty would have, clothes and dancing and skating lessons, but she was not so emotionally available. And I was.
Why do you think that was the case?
Probably because she did not get it in her own family of origin. My mom was kind of a caretaker. Her own mother was very ill for most of her life, so she became the caretaker to her own mother. And I think that at that time, my mom, she was a teacher, and it was really interesting. We've talked about this, that she was able to be really expressive and positive, with her students. And I think that with me, she used to say all the time, there's a right way and there's a wrong way of doing things. And I think that very frequently she felt I did it the wrong way. So I had things that I needed to sort out, and my father was the one who really balanced things out, and he was my coach. For me, sports was something that was really important. I mean, I was number 10 in Canada as a junior tennis player. And so there were issues, as we all have issues, that needed to be worked out. And of course, my mantra, acknowledge and address and resolve. But again, I think that for me and for all of us, love really does nurture the soul, and there are no substitutes. There are no substitutes. I tell the story of some of the patients that I treated in Sarasota, Florida, who had great wealth and terrible marriages, and perhaps terrible early beginnings where there was abuse of different kinds, whether it was physical, emotional, sexual, or just being with parents who weren't emotionally available. And I can remember a number of women, they would go shopping. And one woman in particular would travel to New York on their private plane, and she'd go to Tiffany's and she'd buy a bracelet, but then that did it only for the day, because she came back, and what she really wanted was that love connection with her husband, and that was exactly what we were trying to work out and hopefully resolve, which we did.
Which you did.
Which we did.
Let's hear from Jim Gilligan, too, in a short clip on love and the soul and how he describes it as well.
Okay.
The human soul, the human psyche, needs love in order to survive, just as specifically as the body needs oxygen in order to survive. And for people who haven't been starved for love, that may not be the first thing they would think of. I mean, we kind of take it for granted that we get love from a lot of people. But if you have lived in an environment where you were starved for that, you're talking about a whole different range of experience. Just like with somebody who's starved for oxygen. I mean, most of the time we don't even think about the air we breathe. It's just the air we breathe. But when somebody's oxygen supply is cut off, you realize it's life-threatening in a very short time. Well, the same with the prisoners. They were like people whose oxygen supply had been cut off, but it was their love supply. And I realized that without love, the soul cannot survive. It dies. And that's what these men were telling me. Their souls had died. That's why they were capable of killing other people.
Their souls have died. So without love, we're like the walking dead. And you were seeing that and have seen it in so many cases, right? You've dealt with
and I still do.
do.
You know, I'm thinking of a couple of patients right now that I'm working with, and all they wanted, and they say this every single week. You know, one woman is 58, the other woman is 64. They've been incredibly successful professionally, and they'll say to me, all we wanted was to find lasting love, and somehow it's been elusive. And of course, I try to motivate them and inspire them. I mean, it's certainly at 58 and 64, I mean, people, they're not, you know, it's not too late. And I really do believe that you're never too old and it's never too late to find the love of your life. In fact, there was a story in the Times last week, which I loved. A 103-year-old man from Sarasota was engaged to a 99-year-old woman. I mean, how beautiful is that? So we're all, I mean, people, of course, these days are all on the dating sites. I mean, 80% of people are looking for love, you know, online. And I think that in many, many ways, that face-to-face human connection on a day-to-day basis is really lacking. Because, you know, I used to tell people all the time, Jim, go to the gym and you'll be able to connect with people. And I look around the gym because I work out regularly, and everybody is connected to their phones, and so that there has become less and less human face-to-face connection. And people are really feeling it. In fact, I had 2 students from Columbia University come to my office last week, and they're interviewing me about dating over 65 for their master's thesis. So we started to talk about...
So these are young kids, 20, 21-year-olds.
Yes.
Doing research on
older?
The older...
65 and
over 65.
Yes.
And their issues about love?
Well, they were really so wonderful and so open, and they were saying that it was really tough, that it was really, really tough. Here they are at Columbia University, master's students, to connect. And
tough for them as students, as well as the older people they were researching?
Well, they were talking about themselves. That it was so tough. It was so tough to connect. And the comment that these 2 young women made, it's like, gee, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference in terms of challenge and difficulty and pain and frustration between the 65-year-old group that they're studying and themselves and their peers.
Wow, but
you know,
but they're in one of the finest schools around there.
Right.
Is it the pressure? I mean, they've got a whole bunch of possible partners, friends, lovers, whatever, around them. I mean, what is hindering this? What are they afraid or of this?
I think that people are more connected to their phones and to their computers,
careers,
and
getting
to
ahead,
careers
stuff like
and
that.
Getting ahead, than to this kind of interaction. You know, people will tell me all the time they'll go to a restaurant, or they'll go. Single people will go to a bar. So you would hope that you're going to be talking to the person next to you,
Connecting.
You know, basic connection.
Yeah.
So what's happening? Well, the person next to you is either on their phone, or they're connected, you know, with the things that people are you know, putting in their ears, And that even at the bars where people are supposedly wanting to go to connect, it's not happening. It's difficult.
So
We're afraid, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
you know?
right. Now we're going to have another short clip from Jim Gilligan too on the roots of violence. So is this sort of a human universal fear, the fear of intimacy, the fear of love and trusting?
The fear of not having it, and the fear of not having
going
it.
back to early childhood experiences. Let's see what Jim says here on terms of roots of violence and love.
Okay.
My experience with violent offenders is that they became violent because they felt overwhelmed by feelings of shame and humiliation. When I would ask them why they had assaulted somebody, for example, that it was because that person had disrespected me. And they used that term so often, they abbreviated it into the slang term, he dissed me, or dissed my mother or my girlfriend or whatever. And I figured that anytime people use the word so often they abbreviate it, it tells you something about how central that is in their moral and emotional vocabulary. What is shame? Shame is the opposite of pride. If you think of pride as being self-love, shame is a lack of self-love. But children can't learn to love themselves, to have self-love, meaning pride, feelings of self-esteem, feelings of self-worth, feelings of self-respect, unless they've been given some love from the parents who are raising them. The child who is unloved becomes incapable of loving himself, i.e., he is a shame-dominated personality whose life consists after that of a desperate attempt to gain some respect from others and some self-respect. What neglect does is it says to the child, you are not even worth being angry at. You're not even important enough for us to punish you. We're just going to abandon you. We're going to act as if you don't even exist. You are off the radar screen of the world. I mean, this is the most damaging single thing I think that a parent can do to a child. It destroys self-esteem. Clearly there's no love from the parent toward the child. The child's self-image becomes one of, I am unlovable, I am worthless, I am a throwaway child.
So lack of self-love and self-respect, and inability to then carry on in some way, in some loving way with others.
Which is exactly why, in really great therapy, if people are looking for love, and I've been saying this since my book came out over 25 years ago, For Better, For Worse, Forever, Discover the Path to Lasting Love.
Right.
Number one is that each of us needs to be in a really good place ourselves,
right,
emotionally and psychologically and psychiatrically, and to be able, as Jim says, to work through what did and did not happen in our families of origins. I mean, we can't change history,
right,
but there is a way to emotionally work through the issues so that people are able to gain some self-esteem. They're able to gain another perspective from a really good therapist so that they're then able to love each other, like themselves, and to be able to live in the moment, to be able to live in the present without having one foot in the past and one foot in the present. So that's the first thing that we all need to do if we're looking for healthy love. Number two, and this is what I have found over, a 35-year, clinical psychotherapy career, is that the majority of people, and I say this respectfully, but it's true. These are my findings. Rich or poor or black or white or Jewish or Christian or Muslim or educated or not educated or Hispanic, the majority of people have not been fortunate to learn the ingredients that go into a healthy relationship.
Which is what Gilligan is saying too.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's talking about the inmates, prisoners that he was dealing with, but
people don't know.
It can be extrapolated to the general population as well, to a certain extent.
Absolutely. I mean,
Right.
on my Ask Beatty show this Monday, my guest was Denise Brown, who was
Right.
the sister of Nicole Brown Simpson's, who was murdered by OJ. And this is something, I mean, she's been an advocate, and I'm an advocate for domestic violence awareness, and I think that many, many women initially, in assessing, who their partner is and is not, they're not clear.
And we should add, too, that Nicole Brown came from a rather privileged background.
She did.
Right? Educated.
She did.
Given all the material wherewithal, and yet
her sister
made some very bad choices, obviously.
Well, she found
Disastrous.
she found herself in a terrible, terrible situation, and of course kept it to herself. But I think that the third thing, so we need to be okay, we need to educate ourselves. What really is a healthy relationship? I mean, what ingredients actually go into it, which of course is, great communication, great problem-solving skills, and emotional intimacy, and to be able to deal with the ups and downs that we all go through in our intimate lives. Sexually, I mean, to be able to really have two people who are healthy. I mean, nobody's perfect, and solid. And yet, when you're lonely and needy, you tend, and if you don't know what a healthy relationship really is, you tend to look the other way, as many, many women that I currently treat, have done up until.
But you intervene therapeutically.
Yes.
With these sorts of individuals who need, and give them
The tools.
what? The tools,
The knowledge.
so that they can
The
that they did not
knowledge.
get, so that
The knowledge, the
Right.
knowledge. So
and the emotional support.
absolutely. So I try to help them, get into a good place. I
Right.
teach them the ingredients, and then of course, as you've heard this for years and years, I teach them my formula based on my own research and book about how to assess who's right for you and who's wrong for you before committing to any serious relationship. And it can't be done in 2 weeks or in 90 days. My research found that it takes close to a year using my formula to find out who somebody is and is not. And you can't fast forward the process. And if you start to observe a lot of red flags, verbal abuse or emotional abuse or sexual abuse, or you're with somebody who says, no, I don't want to talk about this. So you have somebody who's a poor communicator, somebody who has a variety of different issues, substance abuse, untreated psychiatric problems. I mean, you're really asking for trouble. And again, the perfect person doesn't exist, but there's some fundamentals that have to be present if you have a shot at having a successful relationship with anyone.
It's sort of ironic. I opened the show with Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? Secondhand emotion. Now, if somehow we know a little about her own background, and she was in a very abusive relationship.
Yes.
But how would you, if Tina was here or was able to have some sort of therapeutic relationship with you, how would you begin to deal with her? How might that be reflected in the song she's singing?
I would begin at the beginning. And we would go through her family history, and we would take a look at what did and did not happen, and what was her takeaway. I mean,
What if she couldn't really deal with that? You have to work slowly and figure out what people
slowly.
can deal with?
Absolutely. You have to go at your
It's very painful,
patient's
right?
or client's
Can be.
pace. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And acknowledging the pain and acknowledging the fact that mom really didn't care for me, or my father abandoned me or abused me.
Or neglected.
Or neglected me. It's
Right.
very, very painful, and yet that has to be the first step. I think that there are a lot of therapies, we just kind of want to fast forward
Right.
everything. Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's just, change our attitude and change our activities and everything is going to be okay. I wish it was true. I mean, there's room for a variety of different kinds of therapies, behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, therapy. And yet I have found, and in my personal life, as you know, I'm probably one of the most impatient people
Yes,
you
you
will
are.
ever
Yeah.
find.
Yes.
And yet professionally, had there been a way to bypass dealing with the early family of origin historical issues, I think I would have figured that out a long, long time ago. So Tina, as other women who find themselves in abusive relationships, have to begin at the beginning, and there is an educational learning curve. They have to be open and willing to look at the ingredients.
She sounds like she's willing. She wants love.
Well,
but again, there's this but there's ambivalence to the whole song, right? Or,
well, I'm going to tell your audience and
Yes.
you about a patient of mine.
okay.
Okay. This is a woman who's now in her 40s who was abused in every possible way by her parents. Physically, sexually, verbally, emotionally, she was neglected. And they had what was called the family bed ritual, where the family had sex. The siblings had sex with each other. The parents were involved in this family bed Saturday ritual. So you can imagine this woman's beginning. So when she first started to work with me, I mean, her anger, her rage, I mean, it was so understandable, her pain. So we kind of got through most of that. It's not that you're ever going to forget. And I don't believe that forgiveness is necessary in order to be able to move on. I think that if people choose to forgive, great. If they don't, great. So she ends up in a place where she meets this really, really terrific young man. And they're going out, and I'm thrilled for her, you know, finally she's going to get the love that she never had. And she comes into a session, she says, Beatty, she says, I think I'm going to break up with him. I said, you got to be kidding. It's like, why? Everything is sounding so good.
Maybe too good.
And yes,
For her,
and this is what she said, and I will never, ever forget the words. She said, how can something so good feel so wrong and so bad? And how can something so bad and so wrong feel normal and familiar? So obviously we had a lot more work to do with what happened and didn't happen in her family of origin. She was used to an abusive relationship.
Right.
And this terrific young man, and she was dating, and he really cared for her and was available. It felt wrong because she was not used to it. And a lot of women who find themselves in domestic violence relationships, I mean, you really have to rule out the family of origin beginning. Because if you're used to abuse, it's familiar. It kind of feels sort of okay, even though you know on some level that it's not.
You have to unlearn.
You have to unlearn and learn.
and learn again.
It's
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah. It
It's
certainly
very
is. It is, it is.
complicated, yes.
We have a few clips that Jim and Carol Gilligan will be in, very short ones, in which they comment about their own long-standing marriage, which is, the first clip we're going to be showing is that one's marriage often takes the form of many marriages. So let's see how they put this. And comment on it.
Okay.
I mean, that's the other thing, if you're in a long marriage, as we have been, you could say that we've been in many marriages because it hasn't been one thing over time. I mean, and it has to be that way.
Yeah, we've had 7 or 8 or 9 different
Right.
yeah.
Well, they 7 or 8 or 9. Now I think he's married
Over
50,
50.
55 years probably.
I marvel at
Oh, the
Carol
marvel,
and Jim.
yeah,
I really marvel
absolutely.
at them. I really
3
do.
unbelievable successful sons and accomplished scholars and activists and so on. But
Yeah.
there was sort of this little chuckling at the end there, but it was 7 or 8 or 9 different. What are they saying there?
I totally agree. I mean, in the beginning, everybody were all starstruck.
Right.
You know, the romance, lots and lots of sex and hopes and dreams, and then
Right.
things happen. Bills, jobs, unemployment, children. I mean,
Right.
children really make such an enormous difference. And,
Right.
you know, what I've said to couples for years and years is to please try and keep your relationship at the top of the list of priorities. It is so easy for couples to lose themselves in the midst of being parents. And we're not doing, you know, any favor to ourselves as a couple. And we're not doing a favor to our children as well. So there's so many juggling acts that we're constantly having to deal with. And this is where, Jim, great communication and great problem solving is absolutely critical.
At each of these different stages, which
Yes.
a long-standing marriage is inevitably going to take. I mean, it's not anything, it's never static, it's an
Right.
ongoing
Everything
process.
changes.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden, somebody falls. They're in the hospital. They break their bones.
Right.
They
Now
were
you're the
dancers.
caretaker,
Now
right.
you're a caretaker.
And-
it's like, how are you going to adjust to that?
Right.
You know, you have a child that's born. Fortunately, you know, for most people, the children are healthy. But you have a child that's not. And even if you have a child that, you know, that fortunately is healthy, it's a 24-hour endeavor. It doesn't stop.
It's complicated,
It's
as you say.
complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated, and I think it's so important, and research tells us this all the time, the importance of staying connected. I mean, you and I, we talk about all the time the importance of the beginning of a day, the end of a day, welcoming each other. I'm so happy to see you. You know,
yes.
I appreciate, I'm grateful. And these little things, maybe for some people, sound corny, but they are critical. They are really critical. Otherwise, we start to take advantage of one another.
Absolutely.
We become bored. We become boring.
Right.
And sexually, it's really important for people to try to keep the sizzle in their relationships.
Yeah.
And that changes too. That changes an entire dynamic in a
Right.
relationship.
So it is a daily, hourly.
You have to be mindful. You have to be
Right.
mindful, you know, as I talk about on my show. I mean, the last thing that I tell patients of mine who are leaving, I give them homework. It's the same homework every single week. I want them to be mindful and to be doing things that are in their best interest. And that includes being aware of what is in your best interest in terms of the relationship that, you know, hopefully if you're in a relationship, what are you doing every day to nurture that relationship?
Keep it alive
and
and
to keep it
enhance the
alive
love,
and
right.
exciting. And people, so many people, they let themselves go. And
Right.
these are all mistakes.
Right.
Just mistakes, because just like with a plant,
Yeah.
you've got to water the plant.
Right. Water the plant.
Water the plant.
Water the plant. And here's another short clip from Jim and Carol on just
Okay.
what you're talking about here. Creativity that's necessary in a good marriage.
Okay.
I mean, it's like if you do any creative work, you have to be willing to fail, because creative work means you're walking off the edge of a cliff. You don't know what you're going to do. And we're a society that has a very low tolerance of any kind of failure, this sort of notion of perfection. And if you're in a relationship, you're going to have conflict, and you're going to do things you regret. You're going to do, and this idea, it actually comes up in my novel, Kira, because somebody says this to Kira. Kira says, you know, the idea of, you know, one false move and that's it. You know, he does something really, you know, hurtful, annoying, dorky, I don't know what. Get rid of him, get another one. Or she does something, you know, you don't like, get a younger version of her, or something like that. And it's just, you can just tell that's just going to cycle over and over and over again. It's just totally unrealistic.
Did you see Jim smile there a little bit? I was smiling along with him. Listen, I apologize. This morning was not one of my better mornings.
No, it wasn't.
No, all right. Well,
Even though we have to tell the
no,
audience.
we don't have to tell our audience
Yes,
anything
we
because we've got to go on to. Okay.
We do.
Yeah,
Because it's your birthday today.
Yeah, it's my
Yes.
birthday. Okay, but and I
Yes.
have it's a little issue.
Some issues.
And so anyway, and Jim was smiling too because maybe he wasn't all that good earlier in the day either. Anyway, listen, But that's the point. We got to go on, and we've got to, like we're humans. We're, as Cornell keeps saying, we're cracked vessels and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's difficult. It's complicated in a relationship. We got to do that, though. We got to.
It is.
Put it back together.
But it is like watering a plant.
Right,
I mean, you have to be very, very mindful.
Right.
Of every day. And, the couples that I work with and I've worked with over the years, they wait too long. I mean, I'll see couples who will call me.
What do
They've
you
had
mean by that?
long-standing problems for 25 years.
I see. And letting it fester.
Letting it fester.
So it comes out.
There's an explosion.
In a vicious way, yeah.
The explosion is typically an affair. And that is a wake-up call for the couple to finally, once and for all, and it's unfortunate that there has to be a major crisis.
Right.
But I think that even in not dealing with couples, just, in dealing with individuals, nobody reaches out really and asks for help unless something terrible is really happening in their lives. I joke all the time, I don't think there's ever been a call that I've received from anybody saying, I need some help with emotional communication and problem solving. It's never like that at all. But I think that when issues arise, and this is where in assessing who your partner is and isn't, the emotional communication and problem solving part is unsexy and is unromantic as that is, it is critical, and those are the ingredients that will ultimately make or break your relationship.
Now, look,
Yes.
half our audience here would be remiss for me to go back just a couple of seconds ago when you mentioned about affairs.
Yes.
So when that occurs, if it and when it does occur, how do you work with people, couples, as a therapist with this? Is it a deal breaker? How do you
Not
help?
necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
And so how do you help people
It's
get back together again after this hurt?
It's a very, very painful process, and people need to know that women have caught up to men when it comes to having extramarital affairs. I mean, we have this idea that, it's the man who leaves the woman, for a younger version of, herself. But in fact, that's not true. So we have a situation right now where men and women are having affairs in the same basic numbers. So the affair is disclosed. Now, of course, the two people are going to want to have to make a decision about what to do. So the way I do couples counseling is that I'll see the couple together, but I also work with the individuals, and the trust has been broken. And the affairs are typically symptomatic of other things that have not been acknowledged and addressed and resolved in the relationships. And it's very easy, as Carol Gilligan says, it's very easy to just replace.
Right.
Rather than sit down with your partner and say, look, I'm really upset about the fact that you've stopped wanting to have sex with me. What is that all about? Right. So that when things start to get off track, that is the time to not deny and avoid and sublimate and withdraw, but to have the confidence. And it's hard, Jim, especially if you don't feel skilled in this area of communication
and
problems,
scared.
and scared to be able to sit down and say, look, I have a number of things that have been bothering me recently, and not to wait 1 year, 5 years, 25 years, and to be able, not when you're getting up in the morning and getting ready to go to work, and certainly not when you're getting ready to go to sleep, and to sit down and to say, look, and this is what I do when I'm working with couples. There's a his agenda or her agenda. If it's a gay couple, a his, a hers, a hers.
Right.
And we go through.
You see them separately and together.
Yes, in different combinations.
And,
yes.
And if one is having an affair and the other doesn't, how do you deal with that? If the other doesn't know? Or
well, the person who is having the affair, and if the person is wanting to work with me individually, that person is going to need to figure out what they are going to want to do, because I would never see the couple together.
Well,
one is having an affair. I mean,
Right.
talk about collusion with the person
Right.
who's who's
Right.
having the affair. It's a very messy process. But again, it is symptomatic. You don't all of a sudden wake up and you're going to have an affair. There's resentment, there's pain, there's anger, there's unfinished business, there's communication that has not taken place. There are a variety of different things that occur. And finally, somebody makes a decision that they are going to go outside of their marriage. You know, even if we're talking about a one-night, hookup. And then typically it's disclosed. I mean, people are on each other's phones, people are checking each other's messages.
You say typically it's disclosed. I mean, let's say someone had an affair years ago, one-night affair.
I would, if somebody asked me, okay, and I don't
Right.
know how your audience would feel about this, or even how you would feel about this. If somebody had an affair years and years ago, and nobody knew, and it was not ongoing, and the person was not planning to, do something like that again, I would suggest that they let it go. I
Yeah,
wouldn't see the
what's
point.
point?
What is
Yeah.
the point to
Bringing up
dredge
something,
up
right,
the
right.
past?
Right.
The past is the past.
As long as you've dealt with whatever it was that led you to that.
Exactly. And there's a lot of temptation everywhere. I mean, people are on the porn sites. You know, on my radio show, I was talking about how it's close to a $90 billion industry.
Right.
A few months ago, I had a researcher on the show talking about robots, how more and more
Robots, yeah.
people
Being engaged.
are being engaged and wanting to have sex with robots. And
Well, did we just Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David?
yes,
that
yes.
sex doll there.
Yes, and this researcher, he used the term, it's going to become more mainstream. So again, I talk a lot about the importance of dotting the I's and crossing the T's for oneself,
Right.
and also, within your relationship. And we need to tend to ourselves, of course, and we need to tend to our relationships, or we might very well not have the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, the basics. And here's another clip from Jim and Carol again. Carol does all the talking on this,
She does.
which is fine. But this one is about the
She does.
risk.
Of loving.
It's scary, of loving.
See, the thing about a relationship is it's like the tide. It's always moving. It's alive. And the minute you try to freeze the relationship or you get scared, it's true. It's in life. Somebody could always die. Somebody could leave. It's like things happen. So it's a huge risk to love somebody, and it's very dangerous in that sense. On the other hand, if you try to control love or a relationship, you destroy it, you kill it. So
Yeah, right. Huge risk.
Scary.
You've got to, it's scary.
Yes.
But there's no other choices. You either dive in, it's messy.
It's messy. But what I used to tell my daughter Jordana, when
Right.
she was growing up and when she was starting to date, and I wonder what Carol and Jim would say about this, I think they would agree, is that the relationship, as important as the relationship is, needs to be the icing on the cake. Each individual needs to be the cake. And I think that it's really important that we each have our own life. I mean, there's your life, there's my life, and there's our life. Hopefully, there isn't going to be a lot of conflict between,
Right.
between the three different parts.
Right.
But I think it's a huge, huge mistake to put all of your eggs in any one basket. And diversification is key.
Well, yeah, but you are putting your eggs in one basket here when you do get married.
Traditionally,
right?
you are, but it's still really important to have your own friends and
Sure.
your own support system and your own thing, whatever that thing, happens to be. And of
Right.
course, when you're really close to somebody, there's vulnerability, there's dependence, there's fear, as Carol says. Somebody can die, and it is scary.
You got to be your own person too.
You
as
really
you
have
say,
to be your own person. You do.
And exactly, and have your own foundation solid.
I think it helps.
It helps a lot.
It helps a lot, so that you're not going to be that scared.
Right.
And that dependent. I mean, you see kids who are dating, he or she's everything, and you give up all your friends, and you give up your activities,
Right,
and you
right,
give
right.
up. That is always a mistake as well.
Well, there's one more clip we want to just
Okay.
get in here of Jim and Carol again about their own relationship and the longevity of it, and see what they have to say about it.
Okay.
First of all, if you really love somebody, that means you know them, because otherwise you don't love them, you love something else. So if you love somebody, you know them, and if you know them, you really know, and I think that's what part of love is that you want them to, flourish. And so if marriage does that, it's amazing, to feel you live with that kind of knowing of each other and being known, and that desire to see one another be most fully, sort of really themselves. And then that doesn't threaten the relationship. It's sort of ridiculous to think about that.
What a great way of putting it, and sort of ending these these clips we've had. That you could see in her face there, how happy their relationship has been. It's really flourished, and they fed off each other.
Yes.
In a way that just enhances their own sense of love. It's beautiful.
Well, I've mentioned to you, I've wanted to sit down with Carol and Jim for a while. We need to go out for dinner with them and really hear from them the secrets of how they have been able to maintain and sustain what at least I view is a really incredible relationship through, I'm sure, lots of ups and downs like all of us have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, listen, you are certainly a role model for your patients, and just an incredible human being to love and be involved with. And I just appreciate you so very, very much. And I've flourished enormously thanks to you and our relationship.
Well, me too. I love you dearly, and happy birthday, sweetheart.
All right. Happy birthday to me. Thank you. Thank you. And again, so we've just got a minute or two left. You do a show on Progressive Radio Network.
Yes.
And it's on
the Ask Beatty Show every
Ask Beatty. People
Monday.
can call in.
Yeah, Monday live.
Monday live.
From 3 to 4.
3 to 4 o'clock.
And there's also an archives. Do you know that Monday was my 289th Ask
Wow.
Beatty show on this particular network? So people can Google Ask Beatty, and they can listen to 289 different Ask Beatty shows.
One after the other.
Yes.
Binge listening. Binge listening.
Yes.
Well, thank you again so much. We're going to do this not yearly. Is that okay? I mean,
Sure, sure.
You'll come back earlier than
Sure.
next year for
Yeah.
my birthday and so on?
Oh, absolutely.
We'll do it like my half birthday, whatever, on your birthday perhaps, okay?
Okay.
Well, earlier than that. But so thank you so very much. And we're going to close now with an incredible song from Stephen Sondheim's company, Being Alive. And
Love it.
Bernadette Peters singing
Love it.
Being Alive. Thank you so very, very much. This is Jim Vrettos. Thanking you so much, Beatty, love of my life, for being here, always and beyond.
And beyond.
And we'll see you all next week on The Radical Imagination. Here's Bernadette Peters, Being Alive.
Somebody hold me too close. Somebody hurt me too deep. Somebody sit in my chair me through hell and give me support for being